A Mochi Moment from Sadie, who writes, I'm not crying, you're crying. This is what I said during my first appointment with my physician at Mochi, because I didn't have to convince him I needed a GLP-1. He understood, and I felt supported, not judged. I came for the weight loss and stayed for the empathy. Thanks, Sadie. I'm Myra Ahmed, founder of Mochi Health. To find your Mochi Moment, visit joinmochi.com.
Sadie is a Mochi member compensated for her story.
The Murder Shelf Book Club contains disturbing content related to real-life crimes. Listener discretion is advised.
The principal tried to soothe the fears of the students by telling them that only 1% of missing children's cases were kidnappings like Shawn's. The superintendent felt it was important to let the kids know so that they would have a chance to talk with teachers and peers before heading home, possibly to an empty house. The school district had also brought in a psychologist as an advisor for teachers on how to deal with the students' anxieties and fears. Kids were asking, if it happened to me, what should I do? Or should I fight back? I'm smaller than Shawn was. From Depraved Obsession, the gripping true story of law enforcement's hunt for a sadistic serial killer, by Rod Sadler. Welcome to the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast. I'm your host, Jill, and I'm excited to bring to you another special episode, episode 134. Today, I want to introduce you to author Rod Sadler and his latest true crime masterpiece, Depraved Obsession, the gripping story of law enforcement's hunt for a sadistic serial killer. Now, you know I like serial killers, and this is one I did not know about. But before we begin, Tomorrow night is our September 2025 Patreon Zoom. My serial killer class began in August, so don't miss September, second Thursday of the month, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, Depraved Obsession. I really became engrossed in this book because the victims are kids. Look, all true crime books are difficult, but those involving children, they really break my heart. So I balance this emotional weight with my firm belief that getting these depraved killers off the streets, incarcerated and locked away forever, is an absolute good. And knowing justice prevails is critical. So I like sharing these stories. Before we dive in, let me introduce you to Rod Sadler. He served as a police officer in Michigan for 30 years before retiring in 2012. After his retirement, Rod rediscovered his passion for writing, focusing in on what he knows best, true crime. Lucky us. With extensive experience in law enforcement, including training, interrogations, arrest, court proceedings, his writing is highly credible. His first book is set in his hometown and chronicles a brutal murder from 1897 in Williamston, Michigan, showcasing the historical cases that I love so much, and I think you do too. Another book is set in Mackinac Island, a famous vacation resort known for its fudge, horse and carriages, bicycles, and an unsolved murder, which is even more daunting in this majestic location. And I'll be asking him about Grim Paradise, the cold case search for the Mackinac Island killer. But today we're going to be focusing on his latest work, Depraved Obsession, the gripping true story of law enforcement's hunt for a sadistic serial killer. Now, this book not only compels, but also is rich in substance and suspense thanks to the extensive research that Rod has conducted, something I truly appreciate. Rod interviews numerous law enforcement officers who were deeply involved in the investigations, as well as prosecutors who shared their strategies and insights. He also spoke with defense attorneys who provided their recollections and perspectives on their clients' behavior, him being Ron Bailey, and the psychologists, both for and against the prosecution, who served as key witnesses. A hallmark of Rod's books is the insight that they offer into the courtroom dynamics, burden of proof, and the assessment of mental illness in determining criminal culpability. You'll definitely want to see how this unfolds, as Rod achieves a perfect balance between gritty reality and ethical considerations. So with that context, please join me in welcoming Rod Sadler to the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you. I have read your book. I've read actually a couple of your books. I'm a little bit of fangirling right now. I know you are a former police officer, and
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all the years that you put in. I love that perspective that you bring to your books.
It's an interesting perspective because what I have found, I guess because of my intuition or whatever I developed in my law enforcement career, and that was 30 years, I'm kind of blessed in the fact that I know what to look for when it comes to specific details that I think my readers or my audience want to see. And I know the way to get that information. Sometimes it's difficult, but I think that really has helped me in formulating how I want the books laid out and the message that I want to relay.
Yes, there's so much research and substance, and you give background on the defense attorneys, the prosecutors, the perpetrators, their parents. There's so much substance there. And I love to do research on my podcast. I'm always looking up what is the latest statistics on this and that. And my poor listeners have to wade through that. But same thing. I think it's so important because you're accurate, but you set the setting, you set the perceptions that you're trying to portray. In your planning on your books, do you have a goal of what that message is going to be? Do you find it as you're going through the research?
Well, typically I start knowing what I want to relay. And I'll give you an example. I'm not sure which of my other books you've read, but I wrote a book back, 4 or 5 years ago called Killing Women. And it's about East Lansing serial killer Don Miller. And I had a very specific reason I wrote that book. And it came out at the end. And that was that serial killer Don Miller is getting out of prison in 2031. And when I was researching that book, I already knew that was the purpose for the book. But when I interviewed Don Miller's first victim's sister, the first thing she asked me was, "Why are you writing this book?" And I said, well, it came to me immediately. I said, people have forgotten who Don Miller is. People have forgotten what Don Miller did. And people need to know that in 2031, Don Miller's getting out of prison. So I use that as an example for you that, in fact, my message is formulated long before I start writing the book.
That's great. Well, then every paragraph moves towards that end.
Exactly. Yes, it does. And in the case of my latest book, and I think that's what we're here to discuss, Depraved Obsession, the purpose for that book literally is, I guess, sort of twofold. One, there's speculation that there are some unsolved cases out there that the killer might be responsible for. So that was one reason. But the other reason was I wanted to relay to the public how two victims' families turned their tragedies into something positive, and that other families out there that might experience the horrors that the Myers family and the Moore family experienced, they can turn their tragedy into triumph. There's a way to do that. And I hope that the reader or the audience realizes that. God forbid that they're ever in that situation, but that's the other reason.
Well, when you're in true crime, you hear too many of these stories. You know, we just had the victim impact statements for the Idaho quadruple murder, which just tore out your heart. But I do hope that is a little bit of a shining light in there. No one's ever going to bring back our loved one, but maybe there is something that we can do to live through this better. Absolutely.
And even with my early books, I wrote two books initially starting in 2015. I published my first book. And even those early books, there was a message to them. And that was that life does go on in spite of these tragedies. And sometimes it's difficult, but people make it through.
Yeah. You wouldn't know, but my background is I'm a retired high school teacher, and I taught psychology, but I also taught history. And my area of expertise in history is the Holocaust. So you want to talk about trying to help people find a way to move past, a garish, gut-wrenching history. So I understand, believe me, what you're talking about.
Yes. Yeah. Very difficult.
It can be really hard. I say eventually that the memories of anybody you lose become such a comfort later, and not focusing on the last day they had, but all of the days preceding that last day.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. 100%.
See, you do that so beautifully in your books. In this case, we're talking about Shawn Moore and Kenny Myers. I felt like at least I got to know these young teens. I got to know them a little bit. He loved his, t-shirt with the sweatshirt with 66 on it. And, Shawn loved to go biking. You fill them in as human beings. They're not just here's some documentation on cause of death or what have you. We got to know them in their families a little bit. I commend you for that. Not everybody does that. So thank you.
It's a really difficult thing to do. And I appreciate your comments on that because, I get reviews and I get some feedback on my writing and most of it seems positive. I often wonder, was there enough information there for people to empathize with the Moores and with the Myers families? And by you telling me that just reinforces the fact that apparently it did. When I'm doing my research, I think it's really important to try to, if at all possible, talk to family members. In this case, I wasn't able to do that, but I was able to talk to the police officers that were involved in the investigation. And that's how I came across the information that was so detailed about the investigation and how everyone came together to solve this case, local, state, and federal authorities. It's a really difficult task to try to find information about the victims. But in this case, I was lucky enough to speak with some reporters who covered the case, who became intimate with the Myers and the Moore families. And they were able to provide a lot of great information. One in particular, Chris Hansen from the Predator series. I interviewed him, and this case really started his career along true crime reporting that continues on to this day.
Catch a Predator. I was lucky enough to meet Chris at several crime cons. What a stand-up guy. It is incredibly how brash some of these pedophile perpetrators are.
Yeah. He does a great job. And while I've never met him face to face, we've talked on the phone, and I was really, I consider a privilege to have been able to speak with him and have him provide some information from that particular case. He remembers it very, very well because it really launched his career.
Oh, I did not realize that. I'm going to have to ask him about it. So guess who I was talking with next time I see him?
Yeah.
I have to ask you this, and I don't want to ruin the book for anybody. what do you think really went on with the puppies?
That's a great question. That came about. Let me tell you a little bit about Ray Kassar. Ray Kassar was Ron Bailey's defense attorney. And, I sent him a letter and I said, hey, I'm writing this book and I understand you defended Ron Bailey and I'd really like to chat with you. And he said, absolutely, come on down to my office. And so when I did, we spoke for 2 or 3 hours. And Ray Kassar is one of the most genuine people you'll ever meet. He is he's just a nice guy. And while I expected a lot of information from Mr. Kassar, I expected a lot of, well, we filed this motion and we filed that motion and a lot of legalese. But what I got from Ray Kassar was a lot of personal information, not only about the case and how he handled it, but about his personal life, which he didn't have to share with me, but he chose to. And as we spoke, we were talking about the case, and we were talking about the experts for the people's case, for the state of Michigan. And one of those was Dr. Harley Stock, who was a psychologist for the state of Michigan. And Mr. Kassar said, he said he just blindsided me one day when he said, did he tell you what he did with those puppies? And I said, what? Because I know through my experience and my training that one of the characteristics of a serial killer is to kill animals before they begin killing people. And Ray said, I was absolutely stunned because it wasn't in any official report. And so he went to Ron Bailey, and Ron Bailey said, oh, he's lying. We never had any puppies. Well, I had the opportunity to interview Dr. Stock also. He doesn't live in Michigan anymore. He's long since. Actually, I think he might even be still practicing to a limited degree. But we spoke, and I said, hey, what about these puppies you talked about? And he said, that is absolutely true, that Ron Bailey told him that. And without going into details, again, to ruin the book for your readers, I won't go into what happened to those puppies, but Dr. Stock maintains that that's exactly what Ron Bailey told him.
Well, thank you for that, because I really did wonder. And am I going to trust Dr. Stock or Ron Bailey? Stock is not making it up. No way.
I would totally agree with that. And for Ron Bailey to sit there and tell Ray Kassar, no, he's lying. Here's a guy who told Ray Kassar at the beginning of the case, when Ray said, are there any other victims? And Ron Bailey said, no, there are no other victims. Well, it turns out there was another victim. As a matter of fact, there was as many as 12 to 15 other victims. Yeah. Not necessarily that were murdered, but had been kidnapped and sexually assaulted by Ron Bailey. So Ron Bailey's not the choir boy that everybody thought he was. And so I would concur with you. I would trust Dr. Stock far more than I would trust Ron Bailey.
Exactly. That's why I had to ask you about that.
Sure.
It's just one of those little points, because I do know that there is a propensity for serial killers to start with animals and then graduating onto humans. And that caught my attention. Yeah.
Great question.
Thank you. Did you reach out to Ron Bailey? Is he still alive?
I did not. He is still alive. He's a part of the Michigan Department of Corrections as an inmate. I did not reach out to him. I thought about it, and I'll go back to my book, Killing Women, where I did, in fact, reach out to Don Miller, the serial killer from East Lansing. And this is just as a lighter moment. I always ask my audience when I'm doing a book talk, I say, does anybody know how to start a letter to a serial killer? And everyone always nobody ever raises their hand. And so I say, the way you start a letter to a serial killer is with someone else's return address.
Yes.
Because my wife was less than pleased when we started getting letters from a serial killer. But I did reach out to Don Miller, and he, in fact, did write back to me. I received about 5 letters from him. With Ron Bailey, no, I did not. I just chose not to. The crimes that he committed are absolutely despicable.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, I am not going to, a lot of people say, glorify him in any way. And I didn't want to do that. I will say that I saw his handwriting. Ray Kassar shared some old newspaper photos and things like that. And as a matter of fact, I interviewed a reporter for the Detroit Free Press because he covered the case extensively. And he showed me a card that he'd gotten from Ron Bailey. And Ron Bailey has absolutely beautiful penmanship. In cursive. Not in printing, in cursive. It's just absolutely beautiful hand.
Cursive is now an ancient text.
Well, Ron Bailey writes in an ancient text. But I see what you're saying. Anyway, toward the end of the book, you may have read about, I believe it's the last chapter, where a couple investigators re-interview him about some other cases. And he becomes visibly shaken by what their intention is. And they said he could barely write his name. Now, I got to tell you, for him to barely be able to write his name after I've seen what he can do, because his handwriting is just beautiful, it says something to me. Like there's other unsolved cases out there. I truly believe that.
I don't blame you. I think so too. He was too good at what he did. And he knew what he liked.
Exactly. He did.
It's not something that you just, I'm sorry, it's a progression. They have to figure out what they're doing. It's a learning curve. And there's definitely more. And I agree. If he could have controlled that physical reaction, he would have.
Yes.
Right? To be kind of unhinged. What are they getting into now? What do they know? And, there is DNA out there, so you never know.
Oh, yeah. You don't. And in today's world, you never know how many unsolved cases that might be attributable to him. You really don't.
Yeah. I also have to say I liked the way you handled his parents, because that is a just ghastly position to be put into.
Again, I have to credit the media with that, because a lot of the information I got was from media reports, and that's in regard to the victims and the Baileys. But on the flip side of that, I did speak to Ray Kassar about Bailey's parents, and he was very forthcoming. I spoke to the former prosecutor for Wayne County, who became the 3rd District Chief Judge, Circuit Court Judge, after that case. And he's now retired, but he gave me some information about the Baileys, and they were good people caught in a very, very, very bad situation. Though I think to some degree, maybe they turned a blind eye for a long time, maybe because they didn't know how to handle it. And who would? I mean, seriously, how would you handle that? But they were good people. I don't think that they live in the state anymore. I did not try to contact them to follow up with them at all. But I do know from all indications they were very, very good people caught in a very, very bad situation.
And that comes through. I think it's terrible when these perpetrators do this, and then the family, the sister, the parent, everybody's attacked. And I'm saying they're living through their worst days too. I don't want to equate anything, but everybody's pain and anguish is still pain and anguish.
Yeah, I truly believe that Mr. Bailey, let me preface that by saying he protected his family as best he could. the remaining family members, his wife and his other two kids. They moved out of their home, I'm sure out of shame and out of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Bailey was the only one that came to any of Ron Bailey's trials. And I think that he legitimately shared the pain of the Myers family and the Moore family. I really do believe that.
Yeah, because Ron also had a girlfriend.
A pseudo-girlfriend.
Right. But there's this woman that he's kind of with, which is, again, giving that illusion of normalcy.
Exactly.
And he knew he had to do that. Something else that he did, too. This struck me, too. He takes his station wagon, goes to work, and parks it back in the weeds.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that struck me about, again, his behavior. Oh, telling people, oh, my car broke down and I'm walking. Well, that's the car that was being identified as the car of the person who kidnapped the boy. And it's all being talked about. And after a month, I believe they told him he had to move it.
Yeah, nobody made the connection. And I think Kenny Myers' case was not as highly, well, in fact, I know it was not as highly publicized as the Shawn Moore case at all. I think had it been, then maybe they would have put two and two together and maybe Shawn Moore would still be alive. That's pure speculation on my part. But I did a lot of research and there were not a lot of newspaper articles out there about Kenny Myers' abduction and murder. There were some, and most of them came about after Shawn Moore's kidnapping a year later, when the police started to put two and two together. And that's when most of the articles about Kenny Myers' abduction and murder started to appear. So I think, had there been more coverage of Kenny Myers' abduction and eventual murder, maybe someone would have made that connection to Ron Bailey's old Buick station wagon that he'd been driving back and forth. Because it was, if you'll pardon my French, it was a piece of shit. And it really was, and very noticeable. I mean, who drives a white over brown Buick station wagon, even in the mid-'80s? So, you make a good point.
Well, I know. See, I can't judge by normal people because I'm in true crime. I mean, I read that and was like, I'm suspicious. I'm like, why is that there? Whose car is that? That's right. Ron's car. Why is Ron parking the car in the weeds? The hair on the back of my neck shoots up and I'm suspicious. But I understand I'm not normal because I'm into true crime and I'm suspicious about everybody.
Sure.
So it's hard to remember back in the day, true crime wasn't even like true crime. Certainly not like now with,
right.
a gazillion podcasts and the books and all. So I did wonder about that. Yeah, I just love the way you handled this. Is there any follow-up with the Oakland child killer? Because there's a number of connected deaths of children that we wonder if Ron was involved with. But it's like you teasing us a little bit at the end of the book, where I'm like, well,
I didn't intend that to be a tease. I wanted people to know that there are still 4 unsolved murders of children in Oakland County, Michigan from the mid-1970s. And I'll go into a little bit of detail here. There was some suspicion that it was a group of people who committed those murders. There was some suspicion at some point that maybe Ron Bailey could have been involved. And even the people that I talked to Jess Lopez, the retired FBI special agent. I spoke to the other police officers involved. And everybody said, well, Ron Bailey was too young. he was probably only, riding his bicycle and training wheels around the neighborhood. Well,
oh boy.
What they had forgotten was that Ron Bailey was born in 1959, and the Oakland County child killings began in 1976. And so Ron Bailey would have been 17 years old, probably had his driver's license at that point. And then when the task force when they regrouped in 2006 and began to reopen the Oakland County child killing investigations, one of the troopers that was assigned to follow up on Ron Bailey said, well, Ron Bailey was locked up in the Hawthorne Center and the Northville Regional Psychiatric Hospital at that time. So it couldn't have been him. Well, as I got to checking, I realized from a couple interviews and from doing my own research that Ron Bailey was able to come and go as he pleased.
Oh my God.
He was able to go out to work. He was able to have weekend furloughs and go spend time with his family. He'd get out on a Friday and come back on a Sunday. All he had to do was move a magnet on a board that says in or out. That's what I've learned. And so could Ron Bailey have somehow been involved in those? That's the suspicion that's out there. Again, my intention wasn't to tease anybody about, hey, maybe this is the killer. This book isn't about the Oakland County child killings. This book is about Ron Bailey, a sadistic pedophiliac serial killer. But there are some other cases out there, and there are some investigators out there that believe that Ron Bailey could have somehow been involved in those.
See, I totally agree with you. And bringing up his being in the psychiatric hospital, why was he in the psychiatric hospital? They didn't just wake up one morning and say, I don't think Ron's happy. He was kidnapping children.
Yes, he was.
That's why he's in there. So he is certainly capable of continuing to kidnap children.
Absolutely.
He's already done it. And that he could get out? Whoa.
Yeah.
I'm suspicious.
Oh, I am too. There's another case down in Sylvania, Ohio, that the police asked Dr. Stock to talk to Ron Bailey about. The Sylvania, Ohio, some law enforcement agency down there. I don't know if it was the city, if it was the county, if it was the Ohio State Police. I don't know who it was, but somebody contacted Dr. Stock. And they had a similar case. Teenager plied with alcohol, strangled, left along a riverbank. An unsolved case down there in the early 80s. And, Ron Bailey admitted that he stopped in Sylvania, Ohio on his way back from Florida. So, if you put two and two together.
Sometimes it actually equals 4.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. I feel like you didn't like my saying it was a tease, but it just really made me think about Ron, his behavior, and what the possibilities are, and that this is still hanging out there. And I always believe that somebody knows something.
Oh, I think so too. I totally agree with you. Again, I'll jump back to the beginning of our conversation here where you said, do you have the end in sight before you begin writing it? And the purpose for this book was to make the public aware that there may be other cases that are out there.
Yeah. If you knew Ron at this time, if you knew he was in and out, a teenage friend or something, you might not have thought about this in decades, but maybe you do know something.
It's funny you should mention that because I actually, this is what happens when I write a book. After it comes out, I start getting calls from people. Like I'm the tip line, I guess. And that's what it feels like sometimes. But I actually had one of Ron Bailey's childhood friends contact me and said, yeah, he was a weird individual, and we used to fool around together, and he just kind of verified basically everything that I already knew from his criminal history. So it's interesting how that happens when you, and maybe that's a good thing though, because everything I get, if there's a criminal element to it, I forward it on to the investigators. You know, if there's other cold cases out there and I get some information, it goes back to the police.
Yeah. Well, yes, of course. Yes. That to me that's golden if that happens. I mean, I have to assume if you get something wrong and somebody didn't like it, you're definitely going to hear about that. I know that's true with me. But at the same time, when you get that confirmation from someone who was having that personal conversation, that personal relationship with him at the time, there you are. Yeah. It just confirms I did this right. Good.
Yeah, I guess so.
Too. Yeah, believe me, if you were wrong, you would have heard that. But you didn't hear, well, people may not like something, but it doesn't mean you're wrong. But if you're wrong and you hear that, it's like, oh, I didn't verify that. Okay. And then you go check. And then you find out you aren't wrong, which is actually wonderful.
Yeah.
The sprinkles on the ice cream. So tell me now, what's next?
Wow. There's a couple things going on. The book, the last book I wrote before Depraved Obsession, called Grim Paradise, The Cold Case Search for the Mackinac Island Killer. Are you from Michigan? I don't know where you're from.
I'm born in New Jersey, living in Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I'll just give you a quick rundown. In 1960, there was a Mackinac Island. Let me back up. Mackinac Island is the crown jewel vacation spot for worldwide travelers here in Michigan.
I saw the movie Somewhere in Time a million years ago and fell in love with the movie and that island.
Yes. And so what a lot of people don't know is that in 1960, there was a murder there. And it was a Dearborn widow who was up there for a short weekend vacation. And she ended up being murdered. And her case to this day remains unsolved. And so I wrote a book about it. It's called Grim Paradise. And after that book came out, I've received, let's just say, some tips that are very, very interesting. And so one possibility, depending on where this goes, because the book's already been published, is maybe a second edition to that.
Wow.
Now, I'm not committing to that. I'm just saying that's a possibility.
Okay.
Beyond that, I am working on 2 new books. One is a quadruple murder here in Michigan from 1934. And the other one I would rather not talk about because it's a very active investigation right now.
Okay.
So we'll just leave it at that.
I am aware of, I think it was maybe your first book that was set in
1897.
1897, yes. And then it was your great-great-great-grandfather who was telling the story?
Actually, he was the elected sheriff here in Ingham County, Michigan in 1896 and 1897. And he investigated just a macabre murder where a guy was living with his wife who was, let's just say she had some emotional problems, and with his 85-year-old mother. And he went for a day's work out on the streets. And when he came home, he discovered that his wife had beheaded his mother and put her head on a plate for him for dinner. And so that was the subject of my first book in 2015. It's called To Hell I Must Go. And that comes from a little song that she would sing in the jail cell. And the words were, I can't go to heaven, to hell I must go. Murderers don't go to heaven, so that's where I must go. I had so much fun writing that book. That was basically the catalyst for me continuing my writing. That book began as a genealogy project. I was just doing some research on my great-great-grandfather because I thought it was cool that he was the sheriff at the time. And I came across this newspaper article about this macabre murder, and I thought, well, this would make a really good book. And so that was the start of it all.
What a story. You're describing it. You're saying, and here's this man, and his wife has some emotional problems, and he's living with his mother. And in my head, I went, well, what could go wrong?
What?
And there you are. Oh,
yeah, absolutely.
I don't mean to make fun of it. That's terrible.
No.
But you have that bizarre humor of mine.
Absolutely. Yeah. I often wondered when I was researching that book, because there's not a lot of people alive to talk to from 120 some years ago. And so I often wondered, because there was a lot of media about it, if the press took some liberties in describing it. And so in the newspaper articles, particularly the local ones, they described how the door was beaten off the hinges and her head was set on a plate with silverware on either side, and her face was all bruised up, and there was blood everywhere and hatchet marks in the floor, and her hair and her scalp were embedded into the grooves in the floor. And I thought, I wonder if there, a little bit of exaggeration there. So I went to the archives of Michigan, the state archives, and they had the original court file from that case. And so they brought it out to me, and I looked through it. And there was a handwritten statement from my great-great-grandfather, the original statement that he wrote out. I guess it would serve as a police report. And he described exactly what he'd seen when he went into that house. And I can tell you right now, the press didn't take any liberties at all. That's exactly what it looked like. Yeah.
Wow.
It was a brutal, brutal murder.
Oh, that's terrible. But that document still existed. And,
yes.
And good for the media for reporting accurately, but holy mackerel.
Yeah.
That's something.
Just a side note, I'd love to tell this particular part of that story.
Yes.
I got a tip after the book, because I had tried to find where she was buried, the murderess. I found out where the victim was buried, but I wanted to know which cemetery the murderess was buried in. So I got a text from a guy, and he said, "Hey, I think I'm related to so-and-so, Martha Haney." And I said, I had tried searching for her descendants. And I got on newspapers.com, and I didn't get very far. Now, this is 5 years after the book came out. And so I get with this guy, and he says, "Yeah, I think I'm related to her." And so I started looking at his ancestors. And lo and behold, he was related to her. It was his great-great-aunt. You know who he was? My barber. He'd been cutting my hair for 20 years. It was his great-great-aunt. And when I was writing the book, he'd say, "Hey, how's your book coming along?" And he never had made the connection until after his mom passed away. And somebody said, "Oh, that's Uncle so-and-so." And they started talking about this murder. And he said, "Hey, wait a minute. I know the guy that wrote that book." Yeah, so that's kind of just a weird twist of fate, I guess.
Wow. That's incredible. Talk about happenstance. Wow. So you have some books in the hopper. Do you always write about Michigan?
I do. And the reason is, sadly, there's an endless supply of material everywhere for true crime writers. And I guess, after I got to thinking about it, it doesn't always have to be murder. But for me, it is, I guess. I thought about writing about some cases out of state, but I know I can be anywhere in the state of Michigan within a day and know where I'm going and what I want to see. It's easy for me because I know the process to obtain public documents. I know where to go in Michigan to do my research, things like that. So it's just easier for me because I'm familiar with Michigan. I have thought about maybe down the road, maybe a celebrity murder, but I just haven't made that jump yet. So we'll see.
the bane of my existence, because I interview, obviously, authors, but I'll take a book, I'll feature it on the podcast, and I tell the book story. Now, I do not plagiarize, and I don't tell everything, but
Sure.
I'll also go out and I'll do additional research. So, give you an example. Your police are investigating a case, and they're looking into suspect A and suspect B and suspect C, and oh, okay, it's B. Well, who are these other two suspects? Who are these people? Oh, lo and behold, they're wanted for other crimes and they're in prison as well. So I'll tell those stories in the context of my podcast, because I'm not going to tell you the whole book story, because I want people to buy your books. That's not fair. You do all this research and I give everything away. No, I'm not going to do that. So I'll do that additional research. Oh, I just did Jack the Ripper in London, but usually I'm doing American because I have more sense of the American legal system. But just going from state to state, just trying to figure out how the system works there versus what I know here in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, and it's different. There's different laws. There's different degrees of things. They call things differently. It is daunting just figuring that out when I need to explain, in Colorado, they have this law regarding insanity, which is really different than say, so you have to do all that research. So you being a former police officer yourself, the law in Michigan. So be prepared. Once you step across that border, all the names change.
Oh yeah, I know. And that's why I've kind of stuck with cases, some of these cases I've written about because I've heard about them and they've kind of fascinated me. And so, well, it's pretty much the case with all of them. My first book, that was genealogy thing. My second book, I had heard about that case. The book is called The Slayer Waits, and it's about a double murder in 1955 here in Michigan. And I can remember hearing about that case as a kid. I heard my parents talking about it, and I always remembered it. And so I wrote that book. Killing Women, I was just getting out of high school, going into college when Don Miller was murdering women in East Lansing. And I always remembered that. And I knew he was getting out of prison. So I thought, well, people need to know about that. Grim Paradise. Nobody knows there was a murder on Mackinac Island, that it was unsolved. And thousands and thousands and thousands of people go there every year. And so, there's a Michigan tie. So those are just easier for me than trying to find something out of state or trying to find information out of state.
Yeah, I follow that one. In the Mackinac Island, with all of the tourist trade, if it is some random tourist, that gets tough to try to figure out. If it's just some stranger that rolled into town that may be registered at a hotel somewhere or something for the weekend. And
absolutely. Yeah.
That's hard.
It's a fascinating case. And I will say that some of the tips that came in after the book was published and people either heard about it through a podcast, actually, some really good information I got came in March. Now, the book has been out for a year and a half, and I got the information this year in March. And it was just so unique that I asked the guy, he sent me an email, and in the reference line, it just said DNA. And then in the body of the report, it didn't say, Dear Mr. Sadler or Dear Rod or anything like that. It just said, I need to talk to you, or can we talk? And I thought, well, this is kind of strange. And so we talked. Mm-hmm. He relayed the information that he had. And it's just absolutely, I said, did you read the book? And he goes, no, I heard about this on a podcast. And so I thought, wow. And he lives in North Carolina. He lives in North Carolina, heard a podcast about this, and said, I think I know who did the murder.
Really?
Literally. And so I'm still working on it.
Yes. Well, good for you, and keep it up. And I hope we wind up solving that one, because that would be really interesting to have that follow-up. Wow. See, you never know what these podcasts wind up doing and triggering in people.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Just don't know.
So thanks for what you do.
Well, thank you for what you do. You give me these great books. Now I'm like, which one would you want me to do on the show?
Well, that's a great question.
Can't do them all.
I would recommend, I don't know. Killing Women is intriguing, and it's interesting because Don Miller is still alive and he's getting out of prison in 6 years. But Grim Paradise is really interesting because of the new information that I got. Oh, and I do identify a new person of interest at the end of the book also. Above and beyond the information that I got about someone else who might have been involved. So, yeah, this one's like ongoing. So you might just have to put both names in a hat and draw one out.
Yes. Well, I have my Patreon group. So what I'll do is we'll meet once a month online, and I'll say, okay, so I've got this, and this. They all sound good to me. What do you think? And we'll kind of hash it out a little bit. But that was tough, because I like all of them. They're all intriguing. Yeah, good choices. You've done well here. Thank you for torturing me this way.
That's my pleasure. Yeah.
All right. Rod, thank you so much for coming on. This has been so much fun. I've really enjoyed your insight into everything.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm always excited to do a podcast. I do them for all over the country, and that gets the word out. I'm just a small-time author. I don't have a big, huge budget. I don't get rich off these books. I do it for a purpose. I do it because I enjoy it. And the more I can get word out there, the better. So thank you for that.
That is what appeals to me, because I think that's important. I like to publicize the books, obviously.
Sure.
I don't need to publicize a bestseller.
Right.
They're doing all right on their own. You know, it's more the little guys that have these fabulous books. So I hope I bring some attention to you. That'd be awesome.
I will tell you that Killing Women did get some attention, and I'm not sure how, but I had 3 different production companies, actually 4 different production companies contact me. 3 of them, we did short 1-hour like mini documentaries about the book. One was called World's Most Evil Killers. The second was called I Survived a Serial Killer, because there were 2 kids who survived an attack by Don Miller. And the third was Making a Serial Killer. The fourth was a lady in Oregon or Washington State. I think it was Washington State. She contacted me and she said, I do a podcast. And she said, why haven't I heard about Don Miller? And to make a long story short, she came to Michigan. We shot a trailer. She was going to try to sell it to Netflix, and apparently it never sold. But her dad, are you sitting down, is the Happy Face serial killer out along the West Coast.
I know who she is.
Yeah, Melissa Moore.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Melissa Moore. Yep. I've read her book, and she's a pretty amazing woman. What she, again, you talk about what the family has been through.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to prom and, oh, by the way, your dad's the Happy Face killer.
Yeah.
Like, what could possibly go wrong? Here I go to prom. Yeah. I'm all dressed. I've got my flowers, and what? Dad's a serial killer. Yeah. She's an amazing soul.
She is. And so she came here to Michigan, and we met, and she filmed this trailer. We spent a couple of days shooting it, and it didn't sell, but we've remained friends. She did a real nice blurb for Depraved Obsession. So I made a new friend.
Well, you've made a new friend here too.
Well, thank you so much, Jill. I appreciate that.
Okay, yeah. Then. Hey, we will talk again. I certainly, if anything breaks and Don gets out of prison, we're really going to have a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll look forward to it.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks so much for doing this. I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you, Jill. I appreciate you too.
Well, that wraps up my interview with Rod Sadler. I always appreciate the perspectives of the authors and the backstory on how these books actually come about. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and got an appreciation for the excellence of his storytelling. Depraved Obsession comes highly recommended by me, so add it to your reading list. Thank you for listening. I see you as you hear me. So my next episode will be on A Tangled Web by Leslie Rule. And I have never, ever heard of a more bizarre, twisted true crime story. And that's saying a lot. I love hearing from you, and you can email me at jill@murdershelfbookclub.com or find me on X, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Thank you for joining Patreon and for supporting the podcast and my endeavors. I am really excited about this. And it's not too late. For $2 or $4 a month, you can join Patreon at www.patreon.com/MurderShelfBookClub. And thanks to our amazing supporters on Patreon, A Tangled Web, A Cyber Stalker, A Deadly Obsession, and The Twisting Path to Justice by Leslie Rule. On a bleak, chilly November day in 2012, 37-year-old Carrie Farver vanished without a trace from her life in Omaha, Nebraska. Shocking everyone, she quit her job and deserted her young son, igniting a firestorm of concern and speculation. Yet her mother, Nancy Rainey, steadfastly refused to accept that her daughter had simply walked away from everything and everyone she loved. So brace yourself for one of the most intricate, bewildering true crime stories I have ever encountered. Part 1, episode 135, will drop in 2 weeks. Thank you for listening, Murder Bookies. I see you as you hear me. Share your thoughts with me at jill@murdershelfbookclub.com or on X, Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. Links are on my blog at www.murdershelfbookclub.com, August 2025, with my sources, photographs, show notes, our recipes, and wine pairings. Trust your gut and lock your doors and windows. Written and produced by Jill, all rights reserved. Music, The Pewter Elephant by Blue Dot Sessions.